Hi, I'm Cara Smithwick with Beginnings SC, and I'm here with Dr. Kim Block, owner of Lakeside Audiology in Fort Mill, South Carolina. We've had some questions about the new over the counter hearing aids that have been recently appearing in stores and online. So I've asked Dr. Block to join me to answer some questions. Dr. Block, can you begin by explaining what are over the counter hearing aids?
Yeah, absolutely, Kara. I'm so glad that we get to talk about this today because there are a lot of questions. Over-the-counter hearing aids are devices that amplify sound and can be purchased directly by the consumer. You do not need a professional or a hearing test in order to purchase these devices.
Mm,
We contrast those though, if we think about over-the-counter hearing aids versus prescription hearing aids. And that's kind of how we like to think about it in our world of being hearing healthcare providers. Um, OTC hearing aids, they're approved for adults over the age of 18. And
okay,
they are approved for those who have mild hearing loss, which is pretty confusing because you do not need to have a hearing test in order to use an OTC hearing aid. So how would you really know if you have a mild hearing
right,
loss and qualify for it without having that hearing test? It's pretty confusing. But this
right.
new class of hearing aids was developed after a call in Congress in 2017 to pass a new class in order to broaden access to hearing amplification. And that really comes from a place of the government actually understanding that untreated hearing loss has very significant consequences.
Yes,
And so we
yes.
really want to make sure that patients and individuals with hearing loss and their family members are getting access to care because there's significant consequences such as social isolation,
Hmm.
depression, and then maybe even one of the most concerning would be the cognitive component to untreated hearing loss, where we can
Like
see
dementia.
dementia, exactly, reduced cognitive function with untreated hearing loss, upwards of 200 to 500% more likely when hearing loss is
Wow,
untreated.
wow.
So with that being said, our government in 2017 said, hey, we need uh, a class of hearing aids, not too unsimilar to our readers,
Hmm.
our glass readers, to get people who need a little bit of help, some access to it more easily. And so that's where we are now. So they just passed the final rule. The FDA had to come together and create what the guidelines would look like with the advice from many different industries to create this new class of over-the-counter hearing aids. And they are directly accessible to patients or to
Hmm.
individuals without professional guidance, which is going to lead us to some other recommendations along the way, but that's okay because hopefully what it will do is get more people in line to do something about the hearing concerns they may have.
Yeah, yeah, it makes me nervous without the professional guidance. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah. And I'll follow up to say, as a community audiologist, so audiologists are the specially trained providers of hearing health care. So
mhm,
we have been through the education necessary to be able to provide patients with advice and understanding of what their loss is and what the consequence of that is. And then we have the training to be able to provide and manage the intervention, the treatment for that.
right,
And so
right.
that can look like lots of different things. It can look like a simple uh, amplification device, something very simple. It could also look like cochlear implants. There's a wide
Right,
range of
right.
solutions depending on what your hearing loss is.
There's so many nuances that are involved in an audiogram and the levels of
Yeah,
hearing. Um,
absolutely. And I'll say to that, just as a follow up, that's why with OTCs, as an audiologist, my biggest push is get a hearing test. Before you do anything, before you spend
absolutely.
that $400 on something mail order, or you're at the counter at a local drugstore and decide on a whim to grab something, let's start with a hearing test and just find out what the hearing is. And
Right.
as a professional, as an audiologist, my job is then to provide you with a solution that meets your needs. And that those needs include things like financial considerations. And
Mm,
so an audiologist should be able to provide you with not only the knowledge of your hearing loss, but then also the knowledge of what options are applicable and appropriate for you.
awesome. So who is a good candidate for over-the-counter hearing aids?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the guidelines tell us 18 and older with mild to no more than a moderate hearing loss. So this is going to be the individual who only has difficulty in a couple of environments.
Okay.
Overall, they're doing really well. they feel like they do well most of the time. But maybe when they go into some noisy environments, or when they're talking to someone with a very soft or high-pitched voice, like a grandchild or their child, very, very small voices, may struggle. But if you have trouble in many situations, that you're not a candidate for an OTC.
No.
You need a prescription hearing aid, because you need that hearing aid to fit your hearing needs specifically. And that means that it's going to address your concerns in quiet, in when you're in background noise, when you're just in steady state noise, and it's going to do so specifically to your type of hearing loss.
I remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember my mom got some hearing aids, and when from MUSC, and then when she came home, she kept saying the chip, like they eat tortilla chips every afternoon, and she said the chip bag is too noisy. And I was like, go back to your audiologist and get them to tweak that frequency. And she did, and she's been so happy. Right. But that's just one example.
Right. Well, and my other concerns, of course, I have concerns whenever people are getting hearing healthcare without having professional guidance. Would be that people feel like they try an OTC hearing aid, and if it's not successful, that, oh, I've tried hearing aids, they don't work for me. And that's not true. That's not true, because hearing aids are not one size fits all. Right. And I say that to every patient I see, because we have to specialize it specifically for their hearing loss. So while some patients may benefit from just turning it up and having that OTC amplifier a little bit for just that individual environment that they struggle with, they can throw them on for that going out to dinner and then take them off when they come home and never wear them again. A lot of patients need more than that.
Right.
You know, and so that is definitely important. The other thing I would say is, if you have ringing in your ears, if you have a difference in hearing between your ears, if you have any pain, pressure, or other symptoms in your ears, you should, and if you have a sudden change in hearing, you should not get an OTC hearing aid without having an evaluation of your hearing, because that could be an indication of something far greater going on. And you need to have a thorough diagnostic evaluation of your hearing in order for us to uncover that. And so you could be sitting on some significant health concern that isn't addressed because you were doing it all at home and didn't have someone who has a knowledge base as to what may be going on to help give you guidance.
Right. And I know we've said for adults, but I want to completely emphasize, can children use over-the-counter hearing aids?
They cannot. They are not approved for anyone under the age of 18. And there's a lot of reason for that. We know that our most critical learning period is that birth to 3 years of age. That sets the basis of learning for the rest of a child's life. And so if we miss that opportunity to provide them with the right sound in those critical learning periods, that obviously we have our basis in 0 to 3, but then it just goes on from there. And we miss that opportunity, we are depriving that child from the ability to achieve their best performance and their best opportunities in life. And so, yeah, absolutely. If you have a child who has hearing loss, or you have concerns that your child has hearing loss, it is essential that you find a pediatric audiologist.
Absolutely.
Pediatrics specifically, because pediatrics is very different than adults. We have different sets of needs. And so finding someone who specializes in seeing children is very important. And that is a great way to be able to know that your child's getting exactly what they need, because we have little ears that have much different needs than our big ears. And a lot of times we have kids who can't tell us what they're hearing and how they're doing. So you need a professional to be able to guide that appropriately. So yeah, no over the counter for our little ones. But I will say too, if what's the big push for OTC? OTC, most people feel like the big push is that they're going to cost less. That's not necessarily true, to be honest with you. As we've looked at the numbers, the reason that they'll cost a little less is because you don't have the help of a professional.
Right.
And what I would guide you towards is, if an OTC is something, if an adult feels an OTC is appropriate for them, great, have a hearing test first, get that OTC if you like. But then I'd also encourage you to have it verified by an audiologist. They can just do a service separate to the actual device to make sure that your device is appropriate for you.
Great.
So that's an idea. Again, though, all OTC hearing aids are for adults only. There's no OTCs that have the pediatric features necessary to support a child. So that's off the table. But on top of that, there's programs that people can possibly qualify for prescription hearing aids. There's also just lower cost prescription hearing aids. We have options here because we want to be able to serve whoever walks in our doors. So we have a wide range of hearing aids. So just because the news is telling you that hearing aids are $6,000 doesn't mean that's true. That is not true. We have a wide variety of pricing because we want to meet each individual person's needs. So don't shy away from going and getting professional help over price, because likely there's an option there for you that could be of great help and may not be different in price or much more than an over-the-counter option.
And they'll fit your ear better in your listening situation.
And when you have questions, we'll answer them. So there's just so much. There's so much there. There's so much reason to just incorporate a professional in your journey, whether your journey has an OTC hearing aid in it or not.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. You've also given us a fabulous handout that further explains the two, and that will be linked below in the comment area. So thank you again. And I'm sure this answers lots of questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cara. I really appreciate the time to talk about it.